I'm getting nods. I'm getting go-aheads. So welcome to Morocco. I've always wanted to be here. It's fantastic. I'm so delighted. It's taken me about 13 years of storytelling, actually probably more than that, to get to Marrakesh finally. And I am really delighted to be at the World Storytelling Cafe among so many incredibly talented storytellers with so many amazing stories. What I think is so brilliant about this is that I've met quite a few of the storytellers already here at the World Storytelling Cafe. And quite often we will have a chat after we've done a little performance with each other or for each other. And we'll say, wouldn't it be great if we could just capture that performance somehow and go back to it later, maybe have an archive of stories that we could access at any time. And now we have it. It's absolutely brilliant. I really love this whole thing, and thank you to everyone who is making this happen. Most importantly of all, of course, thank you to you, our listeners, because the thing about storytelling is the telling part. That's a really important part of the word. There needs to be an audience. Without you folks, well, we're just talking to ourselves really, and that's no fun for anyone. This is probably the only art form where the audience are as important, if not more important, than the performer. So thank you ever so much for being here, whether you are watching live or whether you are watching later. And for me personally, when I am performing, the audience are doubly important because I like to make sure that whoever is listening to my story really loves that story. I want all of you folks out there right now to really love the story that I'm going to share with you. And that is such a huge passion of mine. It gives me a big problem because, well, I've hardly met you folks before. I mean, I know some of the faces on the screen in front of me, but yeah, I don't know how many more there are. I can't see you if you're out there, and yeah, how am I possibly going to know what kind of story you are going to love? So with an audience, I would always first ask you folks to help me out. And if you have joined the Zoom room, you are now in the very fortunate position of actually being able to help us choose the story. If you've joined us on YouTube, Facebook, or one of the myriad other places, then you're just going to have to hope that these 2, 4, 6, 7 people that I've got in front of me right now, 8 people, are going to be able to make the right choice for you. But if not, how do they get onto the Zoom room, Yulia? Oh, Yulia's gone on mute.
Sorry about that. Basically, people just need to go on our website, worldstorytellingcafe.com, and choose the story circle, and then click the join button.
That's right. So worldstorytellingcafe.com, go to the story circle, click on the join button, and you'll be here with us in Zoom, ready to help me choose a story. Now, that's probably going to take some time for some people. So while we wait, I'd like to start with a story that I really love. And I'm actually sharing with you in honor today of another storyteller who unfortunately can't be at the World Storytelling Cafe right now. His name is Tony Cooper. He's based in Sandwich in Kent in the UK. And unfortunately, his body is not letting him access anything as fantastic as the World Storytelling Cafe at the moment. So I'm going to share with you a story that I picked up first from him. But it was a really interesting story because I heard it first from Tony, and he was absolutely adamant that this was a story from Kent in England. So adamant about that, in fact, that he wrote it in a book called Kent Folktales. But then I heard another storyteller, I think it was Kath Little, who comes from Wales, telling this story at the Cambridge Folk Festival. And she was absolutely adamant that this story came from Wales. Then I happened to read another book called Cambridgeshire Folk Tales, which was absolutely adamant that this story came from Cambridgeshire. And it didn't take me that much longer to realize that this story, it comes from everywhere. You may have already heard it, but this is my little twist on it. I've given it a bit of a Cambridgeshire twist because that's where I come from, Cambridgeshire here in the UK. And I'd like to tell this in honor of Tony, who, like I say, maybe can't be here with us, although he may well be listening. So this is a story that starts, as I said, right here in Cambridgeshire, in a little Cambridgeshire village called Chatteris. And there was a farmer who lived in Chatteris who was starting to get very worried about his income. He was making hardly enough money to look after himself or his daughter. So he turned to what he hoped would be a quick cash-making scheme: poker. Who here has tried poker? Anybody? Yeah, I'm seeing hands go up. I'm seeing smiles. I'm seeing some people shaking their heads. I'm not seeing any looks of fear, though. Is there anybody who would not recommend poker as a quick money-making scheme? Funnily enough, most of the people who put their hands up before. Well, the thing about poker is that it's really easy to win money, and it's also really easy to lose money. And the farmer, he had two friends who were really good at the winning money part. One was a miller, the other one was a blacksmith. They were very happy to come around and play poker with the farmer because he was rubbish at the winning part and he was very good at the losing part. Soon the farmer found himself losing more money than he actually had. And this was all going on about, I think about 150 years ago, when there weren't as many loans or credit cards or anything fancy like that. So being in debt was really, really bad. And the farmer had to think very quickly, how could he ensure the safety of himself and his daughter? And thinking of his daughter suddenly gave him a cunning idea. And he said to the miller and he said to the blacksmith, here's an idea. Instead of playing poker, I'm going to put some money on my daughter being braver than your boys. Okay, now think about that for a second. Do you reckon that a boy is going to be more courageous than a girl? I'm seeing some heads shaking. And most of them are women as well, which is quite surprising. But I suppose they are the experts, yeah. Well, the miller and the blacksmith, they were quite certain that their boys were going to be a lot braver than the farmer's daughter. So they put their heads together, they accepted the challenge, and they came up with an idea for how they could test this. They were going to send their children to the bone house in Chatteris graveyard. That's the place where they would keep the bones of people who had been discovered dead, but they didn't know who they were. So they would sort of store them in there until they could be ready for burial. And they were going to send their children there to pick up a skull and bring it back home. This was 150 years ago, when ghosts were a lot more popular than they are today. Populous than they are today. And I wonder if anybody watching right now would be courageous enough to head into a bone house in the dead of night and bring back a skull, not knowing what sort of curses you might be bringing back with you. Again, I'm seeing quite a few shaking heads, even from those who were saying that, you know, girls might be braver than boys. Well, the miller went to get his son first. The son came along to the farmer's house and he listened to the challenge and he said, and he ran away as quick as he could. So that kind of proved that the miller wasn't going to be winning this competition. But then the blacksmith decided to go and get his son. And he brought his son to the farmer's home, and the farmer watched as the blacksmith's son sat there and took in and absorbed the challenge. He thought for a moment. And then he said, and he ran off as quick as he could. So now the farmer, as I'm sure you can expect, was delighted, and he turned to the farmer and he turned to the miller and the blacksmith and said, "There you go, folks. My daughter must be braver than your two boys." But of course, the miller and the blacksmith were wagging their fingers at that. As I'm sure you know as well, the farmer has proved nothing of the sort. All he's proved is that, well, their boys were cowards. He hadn't yet proved that his daughter was anything like as brave. So the farmer called his daughter downstairs. Now, his daughter had been getting herself ready for bed, so she was still in her pajamas, but she also wore around her neck a necklace made of lavenders, her favorite flower, and also her favorite smell. So she came down in her nightie and her necklace of lavender. And the farmer introduced her as his daughter, Mary. And Mary sat there and listened to the challenge to go to that bone house in the graveyard in Chatteris and bring back a skull. And she thought for a moment. And she said, "Right." And the miller and the blacksmith were quite confused at that. They said, "Well, are you sure? Are you sure? Because you might arouse a ghost." And Mary just said, "So? Why is I scared of a ghost? You know, they walk through walls, they walk through doors, they can't touch anything at all. So they can't pull my hair, they can't pinch my skin. Why should I be scared?" And the miller and the blacksmith were incredibly surprised at this. So they dared Mary to continue and accept the challenge. And all she had to do really was pop back up to her bedroom and put some decent clothes on, put some wellies on, and then head out. So as soon as she went upstairs, the blacksmith and the miller started having a bit of a confab to just check that this wasn't just a big show on Mary's part. They wanted to make sure that she really, really was brave and wasn't going to run away just like their boys had. So they hatched a plot. The miller was going to go down to the boneyard first. He was going to hide in the shadows. And when Mary came in, he was going to pretend to be a ghost. And that way he'd be able to see firsthand just how white she looked and how quickly she ran away. But of course, they needed to make sure that the farmer didn't warn Mary about this. So the blacksmith was going to stay in the house with the farmer just to make sure that, you know, Mary headed off unsuspecting to the graveyard. And a little while later, Mary came down, none the wiser, dressed and ready to go out in her Wellington boots, still wearing that necklace of lavender. Mary went down to the graveyard and she came to the bone house. She was a fairly observant girl. She noticed that this was one of those latches that could only be opened from the outside. So as she opened up the door, she put a little rock to make sure it stayed open. And that let just enough light from the moon into the bone house so that she could see sparkles of white all over the floor, all over the walls, all over those little hatches. She went over to one pile of white. She reached down and picked up a white orb. "Don't touch that, it's mine," came a voice from the shadows. And Mary said, "Oh, right, sorry," and put it back. Then she looked and she saw another glimmer of white. So she reached out for that. "Don't touch that, it's mine." And Mary said, "Now hang about, it can't be, because you can't have had two skulls." Now, you've probably worked out by now that the voice in the corner was not a ghost, not a monster or anything. It was actually the miller, trying his best to scare Mary away. But he realized now he'd made a bit of a mistake. So he thought really quickly and said, I mean, that's my mother's. So Mary said, oh, sorry. And she looked around, she saw another glimmer of white, and she reached over for that. And as she did, the miller again said, don't touch that, it's mine. And at this point, Mary stood up straight in the moonlight, crossed her arms, and said, well, I'm sorry, but I has to take one. I has to take one because otherwise me dad, he's going to lose all our money and we won't be able to live. And I'm sorry, but you's dead. So that don't matter to you. I'm taking this skull, whoever it belongs to in your family. And she picked it up. And as she turned to walk away, the miller desperately called after her, but wait, aren't you scared? And Mary turned around and said to the shadows, why should I be scared? You's a ghost. You walk through doors, you walk through walls. You can't touch anything at all. So you can't pinch my skin, you can't pull my hair. Why should I be scared? And with that, she left the bone house, kicked the rock away so that the door slammed shut behind her, and walked all the way back to the farm. Now, when she got back, the blacksmith was incredulous. There she was, putting a skull on the table. Can you imagine that? A human skull on your table. Sends a few shivers up my spine, but Mary was just putting it there and being really confident about it. And the blacksmith said to her, are you not, did you not have any ghosts calling out to you or anything like that? And Mary said, oh yeah, there was ghosts. And the blacksmith said, well, but if you heard ghosts, weren't you scared? To which Mary said, of course, why should I be scared of ghosts? They walk through doors, they walk through walls, they can't touch anything at all. So they can't pinch my skin, they can't pull my hair. Why should I be scared? And well, the blacksmith was impressed. He was very happy to give the money now to the farmer. He clearly deserved it. But when he asked Mary about what had happened afterwards, and Mary said that she'd left, she'd kicked the stone, closed the door behind her and come back. Well, then the blacksmith realized that the miller would be trapped down there in the bone house, around all of those skulls like the one that Sarah is holding up right now. That's really creepy, Sarah. I am not Mary, in case you haven't noticed. Ugh. Anyway. Off went the blacksmith down to release the miller, who was trapped right there in the bone house. And when he opened the door, he found the miller still, with a look on his face like this. And as white as the bones around him. And as I'm sure you can imagine, that story made headlines. Soon everybody in Cambridgeshire was talking about the miller who had died in the bone house, died from sheer fright. And this newspaper was read by a gentleman who was living in Cambridge at the time called Sir Robert Sale. Now, Robert, when he saw this article, he was quite interested in the fact that a miller had died of fright, but he was actually more interested about this part in the article about a girl who had apparently been into the bone house just moments before and not been scared at all. It actually said right there in the newspaper, and I quote, they walk through doors, they walk through walls, they can't touch anything at all, so they can't pinch my skin, they can't pull my hair. Why should I be scared? And this made Robert rather curious. You see, Robert was a businessman. He was one of Cambridge's best businessmen. He had a very successful shop on St. Andrew Street in Cambridge. If you've ever been to Cambridge, or if you're ever thinking of going, that is the really busy street next to Emmanuel College. In fact, Robert's shop was right opposite Emmanuel College, but I don't think that's what made him so popular. You see, back in those days, when did I say this was, 150 years ago? People didn't put price tags on the items in their shops. If you wanted to find out how much something was in a shop, you had to actually go and ask the shop assistants, and they would tell you. But some shop assistants would be a little bit sneaky, and they would maybe say that it was a bit more than what the actual price was so that they could pocket the difference. And some shop owners actually encouraged their assistants to do this because they would take a little bit of a percentage of that too. But not Robert. Robert was a very honest man. He prized honesty. And so he encouraged his assistants to make sure that they always gave the accurate price, even if that meant they were making a lot less money than everybody else down the street. But of course, what this really meant was that they made more money because loads more people came into their shop. So many more, in fact, that Robert eventually had so much money he could buy the shop next door and knock down the wall to make an even bigger shop. But that was when his troubles started. You see, soon after he had created his bigger shop, well, it got haunted. And a ghostly professor seemed to be running between all of the aisles in his shop, scaring away his customers, even scaring away his shop assistants. And so Robert was now losing money, losing business. In fact, without shop assistants, very soon his shop was going to be completely derelict. So when he read in the newspaper about this fearless Mary, Robert was very keen to have her come along. She could be the solution to his problem. So he took his carriage, pulled by his fine horses, all the way to Chatteris on the edges of Cambridgeshire, to find the farm mentioned in the newspaper report and knock on the door. And it was answered by Mary herself, still wearing that necklace of lavender. And, well, Mary was really impressed to have someone in such a handsome suit knocking on her own door. They never usually got visitors like that, not in a little rural town like Chatteris. And so she politely welcomed him in and made him a cup of tea. And they sat down so that Robert could explain to her his problem and ask Mary if she could possibly help. And Mary listened. She considered for a moment. And then she said, no. Now, Robert hadn't been expecting that. So, of course, he asked her, why? Are you scared? To which Mary said, oh, no, it's not scared. It's just a ghost. And ghosts, well, they walk through doors, they walk through walls, they can't touch anything at all. So they can't pinch my skin, they can't pull my hair. Why should I be scared? But this was just making Robert even more confused now. He said, well, then why not? Why won't you come and help me out? And so Mary said, well, all I meant was I's not going to does it for free. I wants to know what I's going to get out of it. Well, you'll remember that Robert was a businessman, and he quite liked seeing this little spark of entrepreneurship in Mary. So he asked what she wanted. And Mary answered that, well, being as this was 150 years ago from when her story would be told, she was, of course, living in a time when girls didn't really get to go to school. In fact, people her age and from her background almost definitely didn't get to go to school, whether they were boys or girls. So she never had a chance to read. And given that her father was doing really badly for business and she was going to need to get a job soon, reading could be really, really helpful to make sure that she got a job that would make enough money to support her and her father. So she said to Robert that if she got rid of his ghost, she would want him to teach her to read. And Robert thought that was a very good request. That was a very good bargain. So they shook hands, and right then and there, Mary joined Robert in his carriage, and off they went, back down the rickety rural roads all the way to Cambridge. It was very easy for them to park outside of Robert's shop, even though this was one of the busiest streets in Cambridge, because they had yellow lines back then, but also because the shop was haunted, so no one wanted to go anywhere near it. Even Robert, after dropping Mary off, he spurred his horses on to get as far away as possible. Mary then went into the shop on her own. Have you ever been in a shop on your own? With all those mannequins peering at you? The sort of lifelike figures casting shadows all over the place, usually in sort of poses, aren't they? Like they're reaching for you, or they're puffing their chests at you. They look all big and strong and creepy. Mary was walking between all of these mannequins, between all of these rows of clothes. I'm thinking that she might like that dress over there, actually. I mean, it was purple. It would go with the lavender that she had around her neck. And as she was walking between the aisles, came the ghostly professor, all the way right up to her face. And Mary said, "Hello." And the ghost professor stopped in his flight and said, "You're not scared of me?" To which Mary said, "Why should I be scared of you? You're a ghost. You walk through doors, you walk through walls, you can't touch anything at all. So you can't pinch my skin, you can't pull my hair. Why should I be scared?" And the look on the phantom professor's face after that was one of great puzzlement, as he said back to Mary, I'm a ghost." And Mary said, "Yeah. You not know?" And the professor, he actually didn't know. He looked down at his body and he realized he could actually see through his legs. And suddenly it all made sense. He said to Mary, "All these last few weeks, all I've wanted to do is find out how much this suit cost. But every time I've gone up to one of the shop assistants to ask them, they've run away. And I tried asking some of the customers, but they just ran away too. But now I realize I'm a ghost. It all makes sense." And the moment he had this realization, a light seemed to burst open in the ceiling, almost like it was shining at a hole up through space, kind of like the other side of my screen right now. And the phantom professor began to drift up towards that hole. And as he looked down, he said, "Thank you, Mary. Thank you." And then, well, he was gone. So Mary left the shop. She hailed Robert over to let him know that his ghost problem was sorted. And Robert kept his side of the bargain. He was so happy with the job that Mary had done for him that he went and he made sure that she was able to read. They would spend so long in the bookshop together choosing books, and he taught her personally himself. But he also decided to open up a school especially for girls like Mary, a school called the Stephen Perce School, which you can still go to if you come along to Cambridge now. In fact, I think they even open their doors to boys now as well. That's not all, though. Robert also decided that to make sure that no ghosts ever had that same problem, he was going to start putting little labels on the clothes in his shop so that people could tell exactly how much things were without having to ask the shop assistants. And would you know, that idea caught on. And now pretty much every single shop in the world is going to have a label somewhere to let you know how much those items are. Yes, Robert Sale invented the price tag. And if you do come to Cambridge, you really do need to pop along to a certain bookshop where some people say, as they're browsing around the bookshops and the shelves, they can smell the faint note of lavender. They can't tell where it comes from. And if they stand still enough, sometimes they might notice a shimmer of a man in a suit or a little girl in a purple dress. That bookshop is called the Haunted Bookshop, which I think makes it really, really easy to find. So I hope you'll be able to get along to Cambridge eventually, just like I am hoping to get along to Marrakesh and meet some of these fabulous faces in front of me right now in the flesh. That was the story that I was hoping to share before I even got here, which, like I said, is in honor of Tony Cooper, who was the first person to share that story with me. Right now, though, I'd like to finish with a story that I know, and I can be sure all of you out there are really going to love. And you may have loved that story that's just gone. I've got lots of people doing this motion in front of me right now, and given that I can't hear you, that could be either "Yay, that was good" or "Get out of here." So I'm gonna just hope that it was the first one. And yeah, like I said, I want to share a story now that you are definitely going to love, so that if it is the last story that I tell today, you head off from now thinking that yes, you have heard your favorite story. But I have now got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 images in front of me, which is good. That means we are hopefully going to have a broader spread of opinion for choosing the right story for all of you folks watching on YouTube and Facebook as well, and wherever else this video is showing. So if you are here in Zoom, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a choice of what this story could be. And what I'd like you to do is switch your camera off if you want one of those choices, and leave your camera on if you want the other of those choices. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Or we could shout at you.
Well, you could shout at me, but I'm going to go for the switching things off, because it's really, really important that you make your choice and you stick to it, okay? And just in case there's a little bit of that internet lag caused by gremlins resting on the wires, we want to make sure that you are voting for the right thing. So the story that I tell next, an adventure. It could be a story of cunning. So that is going to be your choice. It's going to be an adventure story, or it's going to be a cunning story. If you like the sound of adventure, then leave your camera on. If you like the sound of cunning, switch your camera off. Okay. At the moment, for those of you who are not here right now, I'm seeing a few cameras switch off. It looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, Abdu just switched his off. So it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 for adventure, and 1, 2, 3, 4 for cunning. Okay, that's pretty evenly spread. Oh no, hang on. Oh, I think Bianca's actually switched off as well. Yes, Bianca switched off, but
I will come back. I like adventure.
It came with a picture. So is yours on or off, Bianca?
On.
Off?
On.
On. So you're wanting adventure?
Yeah.
Okay. So Lucy was wanting. Oh, now I'm getting really confused. Okay, so let's try this one more time. Off for cunning. Stick your cameras off now if you're up for a cunning story.
Cameras off. Am I the only one?
It looks like I've got Yuliu, Mike, and Lucy who have switched off for a cunning story, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 who are still wanting an adventure. So there you go. That's your choice, folks. It's going to be an adventure story. But Lucy, Mike, Yuliu, come back, because I want you to really love the story too. And everybody else out there on YouTube who also wanted a cunning story, I want them to love this story too. So just you three, Lucy, Mike, Yuliu, I'm going to give you another choice now to help us decide what kind of adventure this could be. This could be an adventure with danger. Could have lots of danger in it. Very dangerous adventure. Or it could be a funny adventure. Really fun one. Just a silly one, really. So that is going to be your choice now. Yuliu, Mike, and Lucy. Just you three now. Keep your cameras on if you like the danger. Switch them off if you want something funny. Ooh, I've had 2 go off here. That's Yuliu and Mike. So it looks like we're getting a funny adventure. Oh no, Lucy's still up. Okay, everyone switch your cameras back on. So the cameras were off for funny there in the majority. So it looks like we're getting a funny adventure. But Lucy wanted a dangerous adventure. And I'm sure there are many out there on YouTube, Facebook, and everywhere who also would have preferred a dangerous adventure there. So all of you, you've now got your story choice resting in the hands of Lucy, because Lucy is going to help us decide exactly what our funny adventure is going to be about. Now, this funny adventure could be a very timely adventure, a very timely funny adventure, or it could be a funny adventure from before humans existed. That is your choice, Lucy. Just Lucy now, because she was the last person left here on the Zoom chat who gets to choose. She's going to choose the funny adventure, and hopefully she's going to make the right choice for all you folks out there who aren't part of the Zoom world as well. So Lucy, what's it going to be? I think you've been unmuted.
Oh, I'll go for the one before history began.
Oh, and she managed to get that in before the feedback destroyed her voice. So the one from before history began. That is the adventure that we're going to have. Now, we know everybody here on the Zoom chat is definitely going to love this story because they wanted adventure. They wanted something funny, and they wanted something from before people were around. And this means that it's a story. It's a story that might actually make a few people nervous because it's a story with a spider in it. Are you all right with spiders? Yeah, I'm seeing I'm seeing some nervous looks on people's faces as well. Well, Bianca, don't worry, okay? I can promise you that you'll be all right with this story because this was so long ago in time that spiders actually looked a lot like you and me. They had a head up here, they had a body here, they had 2 arms. The only difference was that they had 6 legs. That was the only difference. And the spider in this story is one a few of you may well have heard of. Sorry, I'm having Lucy's wiggling 8 fingers at me. Why is that, Lucy? Why are you wiggling 8 fingers at me?
I thought they had 8 legs.
Oh, no. They have 8 limbs, 2 arms and 6 legs. Yeah,
Okay.
got that? Okay, good. So yes, where were we? Oh yes, the spider's name. The spider's name was one that you may well have heard of. His name was Anansi. Just nod your head or give me a thumb or wave at me or shout at me if you know Anansi. In fact, give me a cheer if you like Anansi. Ah, yeah, I'm seeing lots of cheers here. Fantastic. He's a great hero, isn't he? But on the days when he wasn't out having those fun adventures that they tell all over the land of Africa, most days for Anansi were pretty much exactly the same. He would wake up in the morning and his wife would be going, and his children would be going, and he would be really keen to just get his breakfast over quickly and scoot out of the house. So he would take a bucket, he would take a fishing rod, and he would walk on all 6 of his legs, 6 remember, not 8 because he's got a couple of arms as well, all the way through the forest until he got to the river, where he would put down the bucket. He would cast the line from his fishing rod. He would pull his hat down over his eyes and go to sleep. And when, sorry, it's so quiet. And when he finally woke up, he saw that the sun was heading down over the horizon. So, picked up his bucket. Do you think he would have caught any fish? Yeah, a few people maybe keen fishermen know that you don't just catch fish by leaving the rod there. You have to, you know, pay a little bit more attention than that. I mean, maybe putting a worm on the end would be useful too. So he'd pick up his empty line, reel it back in, and he'd walk all the way back home on all 6 of his legs through the forest until he came back to his house, where his wife would be going, and his children would be going, and Anansi could not wait to get through dinner so he could get back into bed. Like I said, pretty much every single day was the same. Waking up in the morning, wife going, children going, and so get through breakfast, pick up empty bucket, pick up fishing rod, walk on all 6 of his legs through the forest until he came to that river where he'd put down the bucket, cast a line from his fishing rod, pull his hat down over his eyes and fall asleep. No, sorry, I'm turning into John Rowe here. Yes, so he would pick up his rod. Would he have caught any fish? No, of course not. So he would reel in the line. He'd pick up his empty bucket and he'd walk on all 6 of his legs back through the forest, where he would get home. And his wife would be going, and his children would be going, and he could not wait to get through dinner and get into bed and go to sleep. That was how most days were, except for the day at the start of this story. It started almost the same. He still woke up. He still went for breakfast. His wife was still going, and his children were still going, but just to be a little bit different, and Nancy decided to actually listen to his wife, actually listen to her. And when he did this, he found that she wasn't just going, but she was using actual words. Words, in fact, that sounded like this. Now look here, Nancy. Every day you go off to the river to catch fish and you never come home with any fish. Well, not today, Nancy. If you come home today with no fish, then I am leaving. And if I leave, Nancy, who is going to cook your dinner? Not you, because you are a rubbish cook. And if I leave, Nancy, I will take all of the children with me too. And if I take the children, who is going to tidy the house? Not you, because you are a rubbish cleaner. So, Nancy, you had better catch some fish today, because if you don't, you are in big trouble. And Nancy realized that this was the right day to start listening to his wife, wasn't it? Because he knew she was absolutely right. He was a rubbish cook. He was a terrible cleaner. There was no way he would be able to eat a decent meal again or live in a lovely uncluttered house unless he caught a fish. So he picked up his bucket. He picked up his fishing rod. He walked on all 6 of his legs through the forest until he came to that river where he put down the bucket, cast the line from his fishing rod, pulled his hat down over his eyes and went to sleep. And when he finally woke up, he noticed that the sun was heading down over the horizon. And he remembered what his wife had said, and he began to panic. He picked up the fishing rod and he waved it around the river. But as all you keen fishermen know, that wasn't going to do anything, especially not now. Most of the fish would already have gone off to bed. So Anansi felt incredibly foolish. He realized what was going to happen now. He was going to get home and his wife was going to go, his children were going to go, and then they would leave and he would never see them again. He'd never get a decent meal, never live in a clean and tidy house like the kind that Abdu has there. So now Anansi picked up his bucket, picked up his fishing rod, and walked very slowly on all 6 of his legs back through the forest, feeling entirely miserable. And maybe it's because he was going so slow that he began to hear something coming through the trees that he'd never heard before. it was a sound like this. And Nancy couldn't hear it very well. I don't know if any of you could hear that very well. So he decided he was going to leave the path and go through the trees to try and get a better listen. And as he listened, as he got closer, he realized it wasn't any old sound. It was actually a song that was going like this. Oh, we splash our heads upon the water. Oh, we splash our heads to catch the fishes. Oh, we splash our heads upon the water. Oh, splash, we catch the fishes. And Nancy was now really doubly curious because, of course, he'd never heard a song like this coming through the trees. And to be frank, he'd never heard a song like this. So now he was starting to move faster on all 6 of his legs until he came to a lake. And around this huge pool of water was the most amazing thing that anyone would ever see throughout the whole of history. All around the lake were flying a flock of fairies. And every single one of these gorgeous fairies was taking off their heads. And they were throwing their heads onto the lake. And their heads would bounce along the lake. And everywhere their heads bounced, up popped a fish. And the fairies would catch the fish and put them into baskets. And the whole time they were singing a song that went, oh, we splash our heads upon the water. Oh, we splash our heads to catch the fishes. Oh, we splash our heads upon the water. Whoa, splash. We catch the fishes. And Nancy thought this was brilliant. So he called to the fairies and said, oh, fairies, you are fishing in this way. Oh, please teach me how to fish like you. If I could fish like you, I would fill up my bucket in no time. And oh, it would save my life, fairies. It really would. I would be able to have my wife stay with me and cook for me. I'd have my children stay with me and clean for me. Please, fairies, please teach me how to fish like you. And all of the fairies grouped together in one corner, putting their heads on, of course. And they said back to Anansi, oh, Anansi, you're not supposed to see us. No one is ever supposed to see a fairy. But okay, just this once. Since you have caught us, we will teach you how to fish like us. All you have to do is sing our special song. And with that, the fairies began to teach Anansi their special song. Just like I'm about to teach it to the 8 gorgeous people who I have in front of me right now. So, 9 gorgeous people who I have in front of me right now. So, if you are ready with your hands like this, the first thing that you need to do, folks, is grab hold of your head and sing, oh, we splash our heads. And you are free to unmute everybody here, Julio. Let's have every single voice.
No.
Yes, come on, Bianca.
All
No.
together. Oh, we splash our heads.
Splash your heads against the water.
Together.
You are going on to the next bit. Now, if you want to do the water, folks, you need to link your hands like this and make
Can you turn
the
your
water.
sound up?
Okay?
Neat.
The whole of the first line goes, oh,
We splash
Splash
on the water.
against the water.
Very impressed with Hitcham at the moment, who's juggling a phone at the same time. And the next line goes, oh, we splash the heads
splash
to catch the fishes.
To catch the fishes.
This is like this. Put your hands together, raise them up. Very good. The third line is exactly the same as the first. So let's see if we can get up to line number 3. Ready? From the top. Oh, we
Oh, we
splash
splash
our
our
heads
heads
in the
in
water.
the
Oh, we splash our heads to catch the fishes.
Yes.
Oh, we
We
splash
splash
our
our
heads
heads
on the
on the
water.
water.
And now comes line number 4. Line number 4 is a little bit different. What you're going to do is you're going to take your head. You're going to go, whoa.
Oh.
And then
Oh.
you make some noise like that. To catch the fishes.
Because the fishes.
Yeah. I'm liking this because what you should be hearing right now is a kind of Led Zeppelin version of storytelling where you get echo after echo after echo in lots of different voices and tones. So let's try it. The Led Zeppelin version of the Anansi's fairy song. Here we go. From the top. Oh, we splash our heads upon the water. Oh, we splash our heads to catch the fishes. Oh, we splash our heads upon the water. Whoa, we catch the fishes. And as soon as Anansi had sang that song, he found he could take his head off. And he threw his head over the lake. And everywhere his head bounced on the water, up popped a fish. And he grabbed hold of those fish and threw them into his bucket. And soon his bucket was filling up really quickly. The whole time, and the fairy singing. Are you ready? Oh, we water. Oh, we splash ahead to catch the fish. Oh, we splash ahead above the water. Whoa, we catch the fishes. Soon Nancy's bucket was overflowing with fish. He knew his wife was going to be very happy now. And the fairies helped him to put his head back onto his shoulders. And then they said,
Now look here, Nancy. There are 2 very important things you need to remember. Thing number 1. Never, ever, 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 ever sing that song again. If you do, something bad will happen.
Miss Picky.
Thing number 2. Never, ever, 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 ever tell anyone that you saw fairies today. If you do, something bad, terrible, disastrous will happen.
to which Nancy said, oh, don't worry, fairies. I am never, ever going to share that song again. I'm never going to sing that song again. I'm certainly not going to say that I've met Minnie Mouse. I mean, I'm certainly not going to say that I've met fairies today because you have really helped me out here. You've filled up my bucket with fish. You've saved my life, fairies. Thank you, thank you. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. And with that, Nancy picked up his fishing rod. She probably didn't really need any more. This really heavy bucket of fish. And began walking on all 6 of his legs back through the forest. Now, have any of you out there ever had an earworm before? Now, I'm seeing a few people nodding. I'm seeing a few people. Who knows what an earworm is? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of confused faces right now. An earworm is when you have a tune that's going around and around in your head. That's it's just singing over and over again. Who has ever had a song stuck in their head like that? Yeah, now I'm seeing a lot more nods. Yeah. And the reason why it's called an earworm is because back in the days before science, people actually believed that there was a worm living inside your head that would sing these songs to you over and over again. Of course, nowadays we have science, so we know there's no worm in your head. It's actually a snail. But back then, it was a worm. It was an earworm. And Anansi had an earworm in his head right now. And he couldn't help but start humming along to it as he was walking through the forest, a little bit like this. Oh, splash! We catch the fishes. Uh-oh. What's Anansi done? He's gone and sung the song. And can anybody remember what the fairy said would happen if he sang the song?
Something terrible.
Yeah, something bad.
Something
And
bad.
no sooner had the song left Anansi's lips that his head fell off. And he looked up at himself and he realized he had a bit of a problem here. He picked his head back up and put it on his shoulders, but it fell off again. So he picked it up and put it back on his shoulders, but it fell off again. He picked it up, he put it back on his shoulders, but it fell off again. His head would not stay on his shoulders. So now Anansi felt mightily embarrassed. All he could think to do was take his head, hook it on the end of his fishing line, swing it over his back for safekeeping, and keep on walking home, feeling rather red-faced, although he couldn't really tell. Well, now, Anansi had been gone a little bit longer than usual, so outside the front of his house, all of his children had gathered together and were waiting for him to come out from the forest. And when they saw their father coming out through the trees with no head on his shoulders, well, what would you do? What would you do if you saw your father coming out from the trees, or anyone, in fact, coming out from a forest with no head on their shoulders? What would you do? Okay, I'm seeing Bianca doing a good impression of me earlier when I was showing you the boy from the Fearless Mary story. Yeah, that's looking like what most people would do, to be honest. Yeah. Yeah, maybe do the what's it, Wallace and Gromit look.
Ah!
Scream and run. Well, let me tell you what Anansi's children did. In fact, I will show you what Anansi's children did. And Anansi called out to them and said, "Oh, please don't laugh at me. All that happened was that I saw these fairies and they taught me this special song that allowed me to use my head to catch fish. And they warned me never to sing the song again, but I accidentally did. And now my head's come off and I can't put it back on. Please help." Hang on a minute. Has Anansi done something else wrong here? Oh, I'm seeing nods now. What's he done?
Mention
taught
the fairies.
Yeah.
He told them about the
The
fairies.
fairies.
And what did the fairies say would happen if he ever told anybody about the fairies?
Something very
Something
bad.
terrible.
Disastrous. Well, eventually, the children managed to stop laughing. And they went over to help their dad. They grabbed hold of his head and they pulled. They pulled. But his head wouldn't move. It seemed to be stuck right there at the end of his back, where it had been dangling on the line. And Nancy's head was stuck to his bottom. And now the children were dancing around their father, pointing and singing, "Your head is stuck to your bottom, your head is stuck to your bottom, your head is stuck to your bottom." And Nancy's embarrassment just went through the roof. Eventually, his children did calm down long enough to find that they could actually take his eyes and put them on his tiny little stump of a neck. They were also able to take his teeth and put those on his tiny little stump of a neck as well, so at least he could eat in the right place. But they decided it would be quite funny to leave his nose on his head, right there next to his bottom. And from that day on, well, as Lucy says, they were quite mean kids. If ever they wanted to tease their dad into giving them what they wanted, all they had to do was point at him and say, "Your head is stuck to your bottom, your head is stuck to your bottom, your head is stuck to your bottom." And what I think is really interesting about this story is that ever since then, every single spider has looked exactly the same. If you, next time you see a spider, or if you want, research it on Google, have a look at a spider, and you'll notice that they have a fairly small body, and they have their 2 arms and their 6 legs, or 8 legs if you want. They don't really seem to have a head, but they have a huge bottom. That's because ever since the day of this story, every single spider's head has been stuck to its bottom. And you notice how maybe when you've got a bit of a cold or something, you dribble something sticky out from your nose? Well, that happens for spiders too. Only remember, their nose is on their bottom. And over the centuries, they've become pretty good at fashioning that sticky stuff into webs and things that we see around to let us know where spiders are. So if, like Bianca, you're a little bit nervous of spiders, don't be. The next time you see a spider in your bedroom or in your bathroom, you don't need to run away from it. All you need to do is point at it, and what are you going to say? Your head is stuck to your bottom. Your head is stuck to your bottom.
I'm too scared
And I
to sing
promise you that the spider won't hurt you at all. It'll probably run away out of sheer embarrassment back down the plug hole as soon as it can. So you never need to be worried about spiders ever again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
for sharing that story with me, folks. It has been wonderful bringing you stories today from right here in Cambridgeshire, or possibly Wales or Kent, depending on whether you're going to believe Tony, Kath, or, well, anybody really. And also stories from the heart of Africa too, here in Morocco, in your bedroom. It is amazing. It is absolutely fantastic being able to be part of this. I'm so chuffed. Thank you ever so much, John, for hosting this and for inviting me in. And all I can ask you all to do is spend as much time here as you can. You won't get bored. There are plenty more fantastic storytellers here, plenty more incredible stories, and all for your ears. Thank you ever so much. It only remains for me to say cheerio, and I hope to hear your story one day soon. So cheerio, and I hope to hear your story one day soon.
Hey.
So,
fantastic, Chip.
The way I see it is that's the set over now, and
we have a bit of a natter.
We have a bit of a natter. Hey! Does everybody on YouTube and Facebook get to see that bit?
No, what we're on is the worldstorytelling.com.
Yeah. World Storytelling.
Because if you go, if it's Facebook or YouTube, there's no hat.
Oh, I see.
So nobody will give you any money. And that's really important. That's a
really important thing. Yes. If you want to find all of these many stories, where you really want to be going is the worldstorytellingcafe.com, because there you'll be able to find more about all of our wonderful storytellers. You'll be able to find all of their stories, and most importantly of all, you'll be able to see the gorgeous pictures they have right there on the homepage, the stunning scenes of Marrakesh and Morocco, which just makes me really want to go there one day. And as John said, there is also a little hat there which you can tip into to help support all of these storytellers like myself, who aren't really able to go out and do our jobs quite as effectively as we would if we had an audience in front of us. Remember, as I said at the beginning, the teller part is the most important part of the word storyteller, because it tells you just how important the audience is with everything that we do. We can't, like artists, we can't paint a picture and keep, you know, somebody into a billionaire. We can't write a book and never let anybody see that book until, again, long after we're dead, when it gets discovered by an historian who uses it to write their master thesis. We have to have audiences. So that is why the worldstorytellingcafe.com is such a fantastic project, and why any support you are able to give by going there and putting a penny or two into the hats of the stories and the storytellers that you really, really enjoy is going to be so hugely appreciated. Thank you for reminding me
Yeah.
that, John.
Could you please tell us a little bit about the charity that you're kindly donating the proceeds from your hat to?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's not a charity, it's a social enterprise, so similar sort of thing. But it's a company called Epic Tales, which I set up and I work for. And what we do is we are all the way through this weird lockdown situation. We are telling a story, again, online that you can go and find at epictales.co.uk. But it's not just the story. You will also find on there loads of resources to help with home learning. There are actually several different versions of each story so that children can hear one and instantly understand it. They can then hear the next level up and learn a few extra words that they don't even realize they're learning because they know the story, they just pick them up. And when you're also getting to hear fantastic Scottish and Doric words like the ones that Pauline Cordner uses, you're actually building up perhaps your vocabulary from around the world at the same time. There's also a podcast that goes out that teachers are volunteering on to give lots of tips for how you can use stories to help children learn all sorts of amazing things, like taking the story of Persephone and helping them to learn things from that, like how farms work, where food comes from, which are all really important things that children should be learning if they were in school right now. Taking a story like the Anansi legends and turning them into DT projects and launching things through the sky, maybe figuring out what kind of insects there are in the garden. Fantastic science projects and numeracy projects, all of these really fun and incredible ways to help children go on continuing their education in a way that's hopefully supporting the parents and also the teachers who are having to struggle to support the parents and the children who are still at school with them from the key workers. So that's what we're doing, and that's why I'm going to say that every single penny that gets put into my hat is going to go into helping that project along. So that means it's not actually paying me, it's paying for all of the costs associated with getting the podcast out there, getting the videos out there, getting all of the stuff recorded and edited, the various artists who are coming in to help and perform and tell the story in all of those different ways, and like I say, support home learning through the corona crisis.
And there's a link from Chip's page on the World Storytelling Cafe website.
There is. Thank you very much, Mike. All the way through this, when Mike has been talking and when John was talking there, were you still just looking at my face?
Well, it
On the
depends.
website. Yeah.
It depends what dot you press. At the moment, because I'm watching on a phone, I can only have four picks up. So at the moment, I'm looking at. Well, I'm not. I was looking at Zuhar, but he's disappeared. But I'm looking at his. I'm looking at his wallpaper. Yeah. And I'm looking at Bianca laughing, and I'm looking at you. But if I press another dot along, I can see Mike and Lucy, but I don't see you. And
but what about all of those folks who are actually watching at the worldstorytellingcafe.com? Are they going to be able to see the whole screen? Because Mike said about the safeguarding.
No, they'll be seeing you, Chip.
They'll just be seeing me while you folks are talking. Yes. Oh gosh, so I don't know. Maybe I should try and practice my lip sync skills so that I can have your voices as well. So you're just watching me listen all the time.
Yeah, and I think if you're on an Apple device, sort of a Apple computer, you can have loads of screens up simultaneously. It depends what device, doesn't it? I'm not sure. It's all magic. It's all stuff that Merlin invented, as far as I'm concerned. It's all magic.
I kind of feel, since I'm the main screen on the worldstorytellingcafe.com, that perhaps one useful way forward would be to, I don't know, do either another story or a Q&A or something. I don't know. What do you feel? What do you folks want to do?
We can do a Q&A, couldn't we?
Okay, that was the scariest of those two options. Well, what I'm seeing loads.
I want to know what dragged you into this lunatic bit of storytelling. I remember meeting you on a field and you saying, I think I want to start storytelling. I'm going to set this up. I've got a few. How do we go about? What do you suggest?
This the voice that you are hearing, if you're on worldstorytellingcafe.com, is John Rowe. He is an incredible storyteller because he captures the heart of what storytelling really is. Storytelling, it's not theatre. This isn't writing a book. This isn't putting a painting on a wall. Storytelling is, as I've said many times already in this video, sharing a story with people. It's giving something to someone that you're expecting them to take onwards. All the way through history, this is how news would get passed on. It was how families would share their histories with each other. So storytelling is about encouraging others and building them up too. And no one, I think, in the storytelling world does that as well as John, because he doesn't just tell his stories and share them and release them into the world for folks like you to go and pass on, but he also, when we come to him and say, so John, if we want to be like you and have people looking at us weirdly when we're wearing weird clothes and sitting on weird chairs, and maybe one day on a screen on a storytelling cafe that no one can get coffee from, how do we get started with that? He will actually very happily share all of his knowledge and get you there. I think I've met most of the storytellers who I've ever seen and really enjoyed through John, actually, and through the events that he's managed to bring me along to, like the Cambridge Folk Festival. And actually, you didn't bring me along to Glastonbury, did you, John? That was
I pointed you out to Christine. I must admit that I did. I think I mentioned to Christine you existed, or she asked me whether you were any good, and I said, "Nah, don't have him."
Okay, so
yeah, and honestly, I didn't fall
John's
asleep
always behind
during.
the scenes, then.
I didn't fall asleep at all during your set just now.
He didn't fall asleep during my set just now, which I'm actually quite disappointed by, because that's a typical John Rowe trait, and would mean that the reference that I made in the middle of the story got completely lost. Although at least maybe it means you heard more of it than you usually do. So there you go. I think what actually dragged me into storytelling, though, to answer your question, John, was another storyteller whose name is Amy Robinson. She's based in Suffolk, and she had noticed she was training to be a teacher, and she had noticed that the only time she could get any attention at all from her children was when she sat them down and said, right, it's story time. Suddenly, that was the quietest and most attentive they were all day. So she was starting to realize the magic of storytelling. She asked me if I would help her to set up as a storyteller, because I think I was working for the devil back then. I was in sales and advertising, and I said, all right, if you can drag me out of hell and let me have a go at some of the storytelling as well. And yeah, that's how I ended up in the nirvana that is storytelling, sharing all of these stories with you and listening to the fantastic stories that you have to share as well.
Glad you did, mate.
So am I.
So I have another question, Chip. Have you ever been to Morocco?
I beg your pardon, Mike, sorry.
Have you ever been to Morocco, Chip?
Have I? No, I really want to go, though. And one of the reasons why I want to go is because I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years into storytelling, I went to a school. It was part of a project called Young Tongues that was set up by Marian Leaper, who is one of the most prominent storytellers here in Cambridge in the UK. She's been on the World Storytelling Cafe already, hasn't she?
No. I've got to get hold of Marian yet.
How can we not have had Marian yet? Marian is an incredible storyteller. She's been doing it for a lot longer than I have, certainly. And she set up this project, sending storytellers into school to help inspire the children to start thinking of what was then known as the National Young Storyteller of the Year competition, which none of them could actually enter until they were about 6 years older. But, get them while they're young. And we were at this school for about 8 weeks, I think, split up by an Easter holiday or a half-term holiday. And one of the girls who was in our little after-school club, she went to Marrakesh while she was on that half-term holiday, and as soon as she came back, she was raving about it. And her parents came up to see us afterwards as well, because what impressed them was the fact that their daughter had clearly been so in love with the art of storytelling from doing these after-school clubs with us, that as soon as she got to Marrakesh and she saw one of the storytellers in the marketplace, she would sit down and she would be giving her absolute rapt attention, even though she had no idea what on earth they were saying. She was listening to those stories in their language, absolutely thoroughly engaged. And so that clued me up to how amazing Marrakesh was, how brilliant the storytelling must be if it could keep you engaged even without, the language barrier. And I think it has, even though I've never been, it has still had a major impact on everything that I've tried to do. Because again, it epitomizes storytelling, doesn't it? The idea that this is about sharing, this is about the face of the public, the listener. The listener is really important. So yeah, I think that still has had a major impact on me. As you've seen, if you've come in anywhere through this, the way I will usually work is by finding out what sort of story my listeners want. I hope you all got something that you wanted there, folks. I hope you go away feeling that you had a good time.
Well, Bianca got laughter.
Yeah.
That's much easier to do if, you listen to your listeners. So I owe a lot to Marrakesh, and I will get there. And you know what? Ever since the worldstorytellingcafe.com had my hit, ever since I went there to investigate what it was John was roping me into, now clearly I've got a cookie on my computer somewhere, because I keep getting adverts for the Marrakesh hotel. So I can't escape. I'm definitely going to have to go.
You should go to Marrakesh because you will enjoy it. You will fall in love if you see it.
And there's apart from one shop on the way into the souk, there's still no labels on anything with price.
They haven't caught the Robert Sailbug yet. Is that where you are then, Bianca? Are you in Marrakesh?
No, I'm in Romania.
You're in Romania.
Yes.
Do you know, Romania was one of the first countries that I performed in outside of the UK.
Really? When?
Now, where was it? Because Tershakir, is that a place?
I don't understand it.
No,
that's Turkish, isn't it?
Has it got an airport? Did you fly in?
No, we flew into somewhere, and then we drove somewhere else. And we drove for a very long time.
Was it the top or the bottom of the country?
Oh, I don't know. I wasn't looking down at myself. I was in the car.
Did you fly Bucharest or Cluj on the airport?
Cluj. I think it was Cluj-Napoca.
Yeah.
Was it a big town?
It began with T. It definitely began with T, if that helps.
Timișoara.
Timișoara, that was it. Yes.
Timișoara, yeah.
Timișoara. I was in Timișoara, and I told a few stories around the churches there, because it was a big storytelling and arts event that a company called One Way Romania were throwing along.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first taste of storytelling outside of the UK. I'd love to go back there as well.
No, you should come to Cluj, not to Timișoara.
Oh, should I? Okay.
Well, you come to my place up in the streets, near there, Kolibica.
And well, you should all come to Cambridgeshire as well. Don't go to London. London's a crazy place. Come to here in Cambridgeshire, where we have the rolling fens, and we invented the price tag.
If I have a question,
Got a question.
do you have a favorite story or a favorite set of stories?
Lucy has asked the $6 million question. What is your favorite story question? And my answer here, I hope this doesn't frustrate you too much, but the answer I'm going to give you is the answer I give to everybody. And that is, my favorite story is the story I am telling, whatever that is. And the reason for that is because I want it to be your favorite story too. And I know it's only going to have any chance of being your favorite story if I am loving it as much in that moment. So I'm communicating my joy of the story through the story to you. So that's honestly, hand on heart, exactly how it goes. I love the story that I'm telling, whatever that story is. I suppose there are stories that I end up going to over others, but I think that's more a force of habit than necessarily preference. And sometimes I will tell a story for the first time and it will very quickly become one that I'm telling again and again and again for the next few months or whatever. And quite a lot of the stories in my repertoire were actually created by children, because something that Amy got me into very early on was listening to the sorts of things that children would come up with after we had been telling them stories for a while, and they would be totally off the wall. You know, they'd be absolutely bizarre, but they would still be really cohesive and coherent, and often surprisingly moral too. So those are some of the stories that I've ended up telling on and on as well. And I do let the children know this. I say to the children, the story that you've just created could one day be as famous as Little Red Riding Hood or Beauty and the Beast or Sleeping Beauty. All that needs to happen is you need to tell that story to as many people as you can, and tell them to tell that story to as many people as they can. Because that's how stories grow, isn't it? They get shared around. And I promise the children that I'm going to do that to their story as well if they do the same. And so that's a fairly good deal. They're happy with it. They've made a little piece of history now. They know that even if people completely forget who they are, their story could still be getting told again and again and again in the future. They've had an impact on the rest of the world and the rest of time. So that's another thing that I like to do. I like to share stories that have come to me completely fresh from the heads of kids. I haven't actually told any today, but if you go on to epictales.co.uk, like I was mentioning earlier, the thing that we were raising money for, there is a video that went up. There are two videos up there actually. One is another spider story, and another one is a song which I wrote based on one of the stories that a couple of girls told me, or a couple of girls made up during their break time in school. So yeah, those I suppose are some of the stories that I really, really enjoy telling, because I know that they are totally fresh, and we are maybe one day giving the world its future Little Red Riding Hoods and its future Cinderellas.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the question. It's a lovely question to answer that one. It's all gone quiet.
I know. I was just about to thank you, Chip, because it's been a great. It really has been a great evening.
It has, hasn't it?
Yeah. You kept me awake the whole time. You see.
That's
not even
tells
one
me that I have done a
snore.
pretty good job. If you can tell a story and keep John Rowe awake, then well, there you go. You know you've done it. You've hit big time.
It's been brilliant, and the Q&A bit afterwards. It's lovely. Thanks so much, Chip.
Thank you, John.
All round of applause for Chip.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is worldstorytelling.com, folks. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Cheerio.
Right.
Thank you so much.